The torn first pages is essentially a work, something that I've been working on for some years now. And at one level, it was inspired by the incredible democracy movement in Burma, Myanmar, over the last several decades. And since I know a few Burmese students and Burmese activists in exile who live in New Delhi, which is where I live in, and I have seen them and worked with them a little bit, and I was extremely kind of moved by some of the experiences, as well as struck by the amazing resilience of this democracy movement, and had been wanting to do something. I also heard some years back about a bookshop owner in Mandalay who had, there's a law in Burma that says passed by the military government, which is makes it compulsory or mandatory for a set of statements released by the military dictatorship, which must be printed on the first page of every published item. And you will find all kinds of books or newspapers, even or magazines, having this set of statements on the first page. And some years back, there was a bookshop owner who I suppose in a way found it very difficult to accept this condition, and he would, his name was Kotante, and he would tear the first page off every book that he sold. And apparently he did this for some years until he was discovered and by the military police, and was arrested and sent to prison for a few years in Burma. When I heard about this from a Burmese friend and subsequently read about this, I was very struck by the amazing courage of the bookshop owner of Kotante, in the sense that this was at one level a completely anonymous act. You know, he was not being a martyr, he was not a leader, it was not a public act of defiance. It was something very much between him and himself and his relationship with authority, or his relationship with what he felt with the military government. And it was his, in a way, very personal act of resistance. And in a way, I began to work some way as a mark of respect, as a mark of commemoration, as a mark of trying to understand what was happening in Burma and what the democracy movement was all about, as well as I felt that, you know, everybody who writes, be it a poem or be it a novel or be it a, you know, a fashion magazine or whatever, in one way or the other is, I think, in a way, you know, indebted and connected to Kotante, because you know, he's tearing the first page out from any author. It's not necessarily a specific book. So in a way, I felt that, you know, artists of all kinds or writers of all kinds are connected to this. And in many ways, what everything really is about is your own relationship with authority, your own defiance, your own need for defiance, your own articulation. It's not necessarily that this articulation has to become public or be recognized or and so on. So in some way, in order to understand Burma, if one can understand Kotante and this act of tearing the first page, you can understand what's happening in Burma. If you could understand that, you can actually understand your own life regardless of where you are, in your relationship with your own, say, authority or your own oppression or your own system, which you find disagreeable, if maybe. So that's what this work really is about, and that's why it's called the Torn First Pages. What we're showing here at the docking station in Amsterdam is the part one of the Torn First Pages. It's actually comprising of three parts. Part one has very definite films. It's essentially about trying to understand what's the meaning of being in exile. What does it feel like? What does it feel like for somebody who is an activist and taken political asylum, but also what does it mean just to live? If you may remember, actually, that September is 2008 September would be the first anniversary of what is now being called the Saffron Revolution. You may recall actually images that came on the television and the newspapers of several monks and then students and monks in Burma coming out into the streets. Again, incredible. If you know what the situation is in Burma, any act of defiance can have the most horrific consequences. It could mean 20 years in prison. It could mean family members in prison. But we felt that we needed to somehow mark the anniversary of the monks coming out. And this is the first anniversary, so we took this opportunity to show, even though the torn first pages is a work in progress, to show the first part. And these are projections of 6 films which are being projected on paper and in a way, therefore, referring to the narrative or the story of the torn first pages. It's also, in a way, by the time you get to part 3 and when the entire work is over, it's also necessary to remember that the only reason why you see the images or why you saw the images of what happened in September 2007, if you saw the monks out onto the street, you primarily saw it because they were Burmese activists as well as ordinary citizens with the small camera anonymously and secretly filming and sending those images out, whether it was to news networks and channels or on the internet, and that's the only way you could see. So there are very few images of the massacres of the 60s and the 70s and 88, 88. There are, but 2007, you can see what happened and so on. So that's, in a way, the torn first pages is about presenting evidence of a terrible series of crimes, evidence of amazing resistance. In a way, it's about saying that maybe poetry also has a presence and has a validity in a court of law. You're talking about commemoration and then actualization, in a sense, as the word that you use. And in terms of remembering and the present, and is it only something that you put in the past? No, it isn't, because everything that you remember, there's a way to remember. And if you remember in a particular way, if you look in a particular way, you are looking only so that it clarifies you in the present. The purpose of clarifying you in the present is only so that you can take a step forward. And so in that sense, the act of remembering really is an act of moving forward in time. So if I am, therefore, remembering the man tearing the first page out of a book several years back, it may seem as if I'm trying to commemorate an incident in the past, but if you look inside it, the moment you look, and if you look inside it in a certain way, it's possible for you to find answers to questions that are actually holding your own ankles in your own present. And so it's not about commemorating somebody else. It's actually about entering into a process of seeing and thinking and seeing and remembering and thinking and time so that you unlock